Mr. Turner. Let's go ahead and get started. Let me know if you can't hear me for any reason. My voice gets too low. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to start with your parents. Tell me your parents' name and where they were from.
Okay, my dad's name was Fred W. Baker, and he was born in Alabama. And my mother's name was Anna. Oswald was her maiden name. And she was born in South Dakota.
Okay. How was it that your parents met each other?
Beg your pardon?
How did your parents meet each other?
How'd they meet, Dad?
Oh,
She was working.
okay, my dad worked in the oil fields in Oklahoma. And he was a roustabout. And my mother worked in a boarding house, cooking, I guess, and whatnot for all these oil field workers. And that's how Dad met my mother. And Dad was 10 years older than my mother when but they got married and they had 9 children.
Wow, 9 children.
9 children.
Okay, so they met in Oklahoma then.
They married and married in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And Dad worked in Oklahoma until about 1933. And when he got the age of 45, this was during the Depression, of course, and when he got the age of 45, they laid him off. He lost his job. So here he was with, at that point in time, 8 children and no income. So he went down to Texas and got a job down at Texas City. And no, it wasn't Texas City, it was, anyway, he got a job. In London. It was New London, Texas. And he got a job and came back home and got to thinking about it. He didn't think he was qualified to hold that job down, so he wouldn't take it. It's a good thing because just after that, that school in New London ignited, blew up. And if we'd moved down there, we'd all been in that school when it blew up. So anyway, in 1935, he loaded up his family and headed for Arizona, and we wound up in Mesa. And he went from job to job and trying to make a living for his kids. And my 2 older sisters farmed out with some help they were working in homes, housekeeping is what they were doing. They were just young girls, 15 to 16 years old. And we us kids went to school the best we could, and then I went as far as I could go, and then I had to stay home and help make a living for the kids. So then when I got as much education as I could get, and I started 9th, and I didn't ever finish the 9th even. And I quit and stayed home and helped on the farm to make a living. And then when I got to 18, I went to the West Coast and went to work for North American Aircraft. And I worked for North American Aircraft for about 6 or 8 months, and it was so much difficulty getting to work from where I lived that I got to looking around, and I could, if I went to work for Douglas Aircraft, I could walk to work. So I quit North American and went to work for Douglas Aircraft. And I worked for Douglas Aircraft until I just got disgusted because there was too many of these old women. There was at least 25 years old, and us young bucks, and these women didn't want to work, seemed like. So I got tired and went home, and this was in the first part of November, and the 10th of November I joined up for the Air Force, and that's where I went up in the service.
Okay, let's backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, when were you born?
Oh, when was I born?
Mm-hmm.
February 25, 1923.
1923, and where?
Oklahoma, Coweta, Oklahoma. Coweta, just south of Tulsa.
Coweta.
That's an Indian name.
Okay. Now, can you name off all your brothers and sisters in birth order?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
My oldest sister's named Irene, and my sister under her was Margie. Margaret was a real given name. And then I come next. And then I have a sister just under me named Mary. She had spinal meningitis when she was 2 and lost her hearing and vocal cords. So she was a deaf mute. And then after her came my brother Fred. And then after him was my sister Ruthie. And after her was my sister Georgie. And then Peggy. And then last was my brother Donald.
Lots of sisters.
6 of them. 6 girls, and each one had 3 brothers apiece.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so you looks like you came to Arizona. You were about 12 years old.
12 years old.
When you came to Arizona.
Yes, ma'am.
What? First of all, going back to you're talking about your dad during the Depression. How did the Great Depression affect your family?
In what way you mean?
Well, just kind of, could be
Well,
financially or socially.
okay,
how
when
did it-
when my dad worked in the oil fields, he had a good job. He was a chief mechanic at a gasoline refinery. And in this gasoline refinery, they took wet gas, what they call wet natural gas, and compressed it, and then condensed it and made gasoline out of it. And that's where he worked. He kept these big engines running. Well, then during the Depression, of course, things went to heck, and there was no demand, wasn't no need for gasoline, I guess, and that's when he lost his job. Up until that time, he had a good job and got good pay for it, But after that, it was pretty rough until we got on our feet,
So were the older kids kind of helping out at that time?
No,
after he lost his job?
I think my 2 older sisters, they kind of got on their own, and I was the oldest boy, so it was kind of left up to me to help support the family. And when we came back from service, and I went back to farming with my dad, and my brother said, "It's not for me," so he left, he took off, and so I stayed with 2 years and farmed with my dad, then I quit, That's when I took a job for International.
Okay, all right. Now, you said your family came to Arizona in 1935?
Yes, ma'am. My youngest sister was born October the 10th, and just after she was born, that's when we came to Arizona, 1935.
Wait for Ernest there. Okay. Now, do you know what it was that drew your family to Arizona specifically?
Some place to make a living, The fact is, he knew some people. He knew a family lived in Queen Creek, and we made he set his sights for Queen Creek. But he worked for that guy for a little while, but then that was it, and then kind of struck out on our own,
Do you remember how your family came to Arizona? Did you go by train or
Oh
car?
no, we drove out. He drove out.
Yeah. So you had 9 kids, almost?
Beg pardon?
You had 8?
It was
8 children in the car?
8 children in the car. We had a big Hupmobile 8. It was a great big car. A good thing it was.
Yeah. So you brought all your belongings with you and everything?
Oh yeah, everything. Because so much of that stuff we had to leave back home anyway, But we made it.
Yeah. Do you remember what you thought when you came to the valley?
Beg pardon?
Do you remember what you thought? You were 12 and you came into the valley, into the Mesa area. What you remember about it?
No, citrus trees, and that's about it. Different climate, different country. Saguaro cactus. We've never seen a saguaro cactus before, but of course in those days a lot of people hadn't. But it was different.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so you started in Mesa, And then did you guys move somewhere after that?
Moved to Chandler, and then out to Chandler Heights. That's where Dad got a farm out Chandler Heights, and that's where he retired. When he quit farming, he lived in Chandler Heights.
Do you know around what the location was where the farm was in Chandler Heights?
Well, he had different plots, you know.
Okay.
It's all over Chandler Heights.
Okay. Where was the house at?
Over on the east side. I don't remember the name of the street, you know.
Okay.
It's been a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, I'm getting ahead of myself, but when my wife and I got married, we moved just south of where my dad lived. I bought 10 acres from him, and I built our first house, and it's still standing there.
Okay. Do you know where that's at?
It's on the same street, and I can't remember I don't know the name of the street.
Okay. Well, if you remember, let me know. That'll be kind of neat to see where that is. Okay. So let's see. You went up to school till about the 9th grade.
Yeah.
And where were you going to school at in
Chandler.
9th grade?
Chandler.
In Chandler. Okay. So did you start at Chandler High then? You start your first year at Chandler High? Did you start at Chandler High?
I graduated out of grammar school in Chandler.
Okay.
Then I started in 9th, and I never did finish the 9th even.
Okay. All right. Now, so what were you doing once you finished school? Once you ended up going to school, what were you doing after that?
I went to work at a dairy.
Okay.
And I worked at a dairy until I got to be 18 years old.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the name of the dairy?
No,
Was it in
Chandler?
Chandler?
It was just a family, you know. It didn't have a name, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all gone now, so
Was it in Chandler or
it was
somewhere else?
outside of Chandler, yeah.
Outside of Chandler. Okay. So when you turned 18, you decided to go to California.
Right.
What made you decide to do that?
To better myself, and I did. I went out there and got a good job.
Did you decide that you wanted to go to California to be an aircraft mechanic, or how did you move into that line of work?
I went to California to get into aircraft because at that point in time, my sister, just older than me, was married to a guy that went out there and went to work at Douglas Aircraft. And I thought if he can do it, I can do it. So I went out there. That's why I went out there. And factories, I lived with them when I went out there.
Okay, so you were out there and you're living with your sister, and you worked at the North American Aircraft.
Yes, ma'am.
And what kind of work were you doing there?
I was a riveter. And then when I quit North American, I went to work for Douglas. I was still a riveter.
Okay. Can you describe what that's like, doing that work?
Just putting superstructures together and in a jig and then riveting them together, you know. Mm-hmm. And I worked when I worked in North American, it was working on the fuselage in the cockpit area. And when I worked at Douglas, I was working on wings. I was putting wings together.
Now you were saying that at the time that you're working in the aircraft plant, the war had already started. Right?
Well, the war started when I was working at North American. But then after that, I quit them and went to work at Douglas. And then I worked at Douglas until I quit, went to service.
Okay. And then how did the war affect the plant where you were working at? You know, as far as like an impact on the workforce.
Oh well,
or...
we worked around the clock, 7 days a week. You know, and we got so far behind that the women couldn't work overtime. So they could work 8-hour shifts, but then when they went home I worked a second shift all the time. And when they went home at midnight, the boys that were left, there was only about a half a dozen of us, worked till 4 o'clock in the morning trying to catch up. Every night, we worked 7 days a week.
That's a lot of work.
And we worked from 4 o'clock in the morning and in the evening until 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, so you had 12-hour shift?
Well, 8 hours and 4 hours overtime.
Okay. All right.
But,
All right. Do you remember where you were when Pearl Harbor was attacked?
yeah, I was working at North American. Yeah.
Do you remember that particular day?
No, not in particular. I just know that everything was in turmoil, you know. In fact, there's a lot of people didn't know where Pearl Harbor was, but we just knew the Japanese had hit us, you know. But I'd already made arrangements to come home on a holiday, you know. But then when Pearl Harbor hit, all passes were canceled. You didn't get to go anywhere, you know.
So production was increased
Right,
at that
right.
time. Okay. So tell me about why it was that you came back to Chandler.
Do what?
Why did you come back to Chandler?
Why did I come back? When?
When you decided to quit from Douglas?
Well, actually, my folks lived in Chandler Heights.
Okay.
No, I beg your pardon, they didn't either. They lived just east of Gilbert.
Okay.
And that's when I went in the service.
So
And then after I went in the service, that's when they moved to Chandler Heights and got his farm out there. See.
okay. So what was it that you talked about this a little bit, but what was it that made you leave California and come back to Arizona?
To go in the service.
Okay, so that's why.
Right.
So you didn't. You decided to enlist in the service as opposed to working at the aircraft plant.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you talked about you got frustrated with. Your
Well,
job,
I
right?
got frustrated working with those girls, and they were old women. They was 25 years old, and I was only 19. And no, it was you couldn't make them work, and they only worked a certain speed, and you had work to do. You had to get it out, you know. And I just got tired of it. So I just told the boss. I said he said he'd give me deferments if I'd stay, and I said no, I want to go in the service.
Okay.
So I came home and went in the service.
Okay. Now, what branch of service did you enlist in?
U.S. Army Air Corps.
Okay.
At that time, it was U.S. Army Air Corps.
What made you choose that particular branch?
I didn't want the infantry, so I chose the Air Force. Well, I liked aircraft anyway, see, so that was my choice.
Okay. And when did you enter service?
November 10th, 1942,
And where did you enter service at?
Phoenix. And
Now, go ahead.
I went from Phoenix to Fort MacArthur, California. That was my induction center. And I was there about, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. And that's when we got our uniforms and, of course, we got a physical and whatnot. And we shipped out and I went to Wichita Falls, Texas. Shepherd Field. I went to Shepherd Field. When we got there, I went to the basic center, basic training center. And I was there about 3 days taking aptitude tests to find out, the best things she was qualified to do. And we was fully expected to go to get basic training just any day, see, so we got all through with our testing. So the 3rd day, we had fallout after lunch, and this little PFC said the following named men stepped forward, said, for shipping. And I was 3rd man called. And we shipped out. I didn't have any basic training. And I shipped from the south end of the field to the north end of the field. And the north end of the field was the schools, was the school, see. And I went to aircraft mechanic school right there. And I never had any basic training. And we walked that 2 miles. It was 2 miles from the basic center to where school was. Mm-hmm. And I say we we couldn't march because we didn't know how to march, so we just walked up.
How did you feel about that?
Well, we got our basic training, you know, we were glad of that, but when we started the school, of course we had to march to school, see, from the barracks to the school. And it was heck try to march when you didn't know how to march, you know, didn't know how to hut to and all that bunch of stuff, you know, and right, left.